Well, brilliant. Hello and welcome to Johnny Vedmore read-throughs here. And we're looking at Iain Davis's face at the moment. We're on iaindavis.com. Don't spell those wrong. That's IAIN and a DAVIS.com. And of course, a wonderful journalist who works on many a platform and has a very interesting website with lots of information, prolific writer, very good finger. I like him very much as a person as well. I've also had him on the NEWSPASTE podcast, and that rocked. And we're going to read the second part. Some call it Conspiracy Theory Part 2. And the first part is probably linked in the description. And this was written and posted by Iain Davis himself on October 6, 2023. In part 1, we contrasted the popular misconceptions about so-called conspiracy theorists with the well-grounded demographic research done on the individuals who collectively have had that pejorative label slapped upon them. The demographic research reveals that there is no such thing as an identifiable group of people who can legitimately be called conspiracy theorists. The research also finds no credible evidence that people branded conspiracy theorists are prone to hold extremist views or have underlying psychological problems or pose a threat to democracy. These claims are all canards, leveled against anyone who questions the establishment and the power it has amassed. We noted the political scientist Joseph Uzinski, who is perhaps the foremost scientist in the field of conspiracy theory research, cited the work of philosopher Neil Levy as a simple and consistent standard by which academics could demarcate, I like that, between conspiracy theory and real or concrete conspiracy. Professor Levy's simple and consistent standard was first outlined in his article, Radically Socialized Knowledge and Conspiracy Theories. In it, he pointed out that conspiracies are common features of social and political life, common enough that refusing to believe in their existence would leave us unable to understand the contours of our world. Levy therefore proposed that academics need a way to differentiate between the rational acceptance of acknowledged conspiracies and the supposedly irrational claims made by people who suspect conspiracies that haven't been officially approved for discussion. Levy suggested that responsible believers ought to accept explanations offered by properly constituted epistemic authorities. As we explained in part 1, he defined the epistemic authorities as... Oh, I went too far with the accent there. The distributed network of knowledge, claim gatherers and testers that includes engineers and politics professors, security experts, and journalists. In his listing of journalists as epistemic authorities, Levy was almost certainly referring to journalists who work in the state-controlled or corporate-owned legacy media, LM, not to journalists in the independent media who are frequently labeled conspiracy theorists. Independent media is broadly defined as news media that is free from influence by the government or other external sources like corporations or influential people. Similarly, in Levy's view, only the right scientists and engineers are welcomed as epistemic authorities. For example, he categorically stated, few responsible intellectuals reject the explanation in 9/11 that cites the conspiratorial action of a group of terrorists under the direction of Osama bin Laden. Most of us have little doubt that it is true. Is that true? Dr. Leroy Hulsey, a now retired professor and department head of structural engineering at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, led a multi-year study in which he and his team of engineers, PhDs, examined the structural collapse of World Trade Center 7, WTC 7. The conclusion they arrived at in their peer-reviewed report thoroughly contradicted the official 9/11 narrative. It seems unlikely that Professor Levy would consider Dr. Halsey to be responsible intellectual or epistemic authority. In his article, Levy opined that the allegedly irrational conspiracy theorists should be identified by virtue of the fact that they disagree with the properly constituted epistemic authority. Therefore, he claimed their arguments and any evidence they presented should be dismissed. He wrote, knowing that the proffered explanation conflicts with the official story, where once again the relevant authorities are epistemic, is enough for us rationally to reject the alternative. But there is nothing rational about rejecting an explanation simply because it is offered by people with whom you disagree. Presumably, like Levy, Usinski would consider himself an epistemic authority in the field of conspiracy theory research. Thus, it is not surprising, in the light of Levy's simple and consistent standard, Usinski's concluded, properly constituted epistemic authorities determine the existence of conspiracies. If the proper authorities say something is a conspiracy, then it is true. If they say it is a conspiracy theory, then it is likely false. Of course it is. That is to say, official narratives are considered true by default, and anything that calls them into question is by default a conspiracy theory. The term signifies to other intellectuals who don't question the pronouncements of the state that evidence which potentially undermines official narratives is by definition false. This conclusion is, of course, a load of nonsensical, fallacious gibberish. Ooh, that's a nice set of words you got going on there. Unfortunately, the conspiracy theory label is so widely applied these days that it has stuck. The legacy media, LM in particular, has successfully deployed it as a tool of propaganda. Simply by spouting the words conspiracy theory, the legacy media have convinced the public to ignore any of the evidence that questions power. Here's one such example. Following serious allegations of rape and sexual misconduct it brought against the comedian, author, and political commentator Russell Brand, the legacy media immediately exploited the situation by criticizing Brand's opinions and anyone who shared them. The BBC published Rachel Shower's article, Russell Brand, How the Comedian Built His YouTube Audience on Half-Truths, just 4 days after the allegations were first reported by, among others, the BBC. The opening paragraph to the article reads, the first time Russell Brand really dipped his toe in the water of the conspiracy theories in early 2021, the effect was swift. It won him a new income stream and a fresh army of fans. We are told that Brand discusses conspiracy theories. This is the coded social signal from Scherer and the BBC to their readers and audience that everything Brand says should be discounted without examination, including any evidence he may cite. This should be done for no other reason than Scherer and the BBC have labelled Brand a conspiracy theorist. There she is. There she is. Oh, she's involved in a conspiracy, obviously. In addition, the BBC casts the people who share Brand's views as conspiracy theorists who should be equally ignored. Furthermore, the suggestion is made that Brand is peddling conspiracy theories as some sort of grift. According to Scherer, the idea that independent media such as Brand, stay-free channels, can be directly funded by its audience, in this instance through viewer number contingent advertising revenue without compulsion, is evidence of his dubious motives. Apparently, the BBC is vehemently opposed to free market of ideas. Scherer explained what got the Brand ball rolling. The door to this new fan base might have creaked open when Brand first discussed the Great Reset, a vague set of proposals from influential think tank to rebuild the global economy after COVID. The lame evidence Schreier states to support her contention that the Great Reset is some vague set of proposals is another BBC article. 5 journalists contributed to this piece, which was published in 2021 as part of BBC's Reality Check series. Collectively, the 5 BBC Reality Check journalists exposed their own deceit in the second and third paragraph. I think this article is going to have my Schwab article, first Schwab article cover at the bottom of it, and let's open that up at the same time. They say, believers spin dark tales about the authoritarian socialist world government run by powerful capitalists and politicians. A secret cabal that is broadcasting its plan around the world. Despite all the contradictions in the last sentence, thousands online have latched on to the latest reimagining of this old conspiracy theory. Here we go. This is it. Does it still have it down there? Is this way? Yeah, look, there you go. I just put my special glasses on, and they've not mentioned my article in it, but that's Schwab Family Values. That's the cover of Schwab Family Values, and they've not mentioned who wrote it or anything. Conspiracy-minded activists share frightening memes depicting Professor Schwab. No, they're sharing Schwab as and his history of his father working for the Nazis, making big, heavy water turbines for the atomic bomb program in a Nazi model company that his father, Eugen Wilhelm Schwab, was the managing director of throughout the war. Used slave labor and all of that, and they like to write out of history. Because I wrote that article, they've had to include it within history. So that's their conspiracy that they're using. I like that article. It makes me laugh. They don't mention me. The BBC's not allowed to mention me. I promise you, they're not allowed to mention me. It raises up too many questions about other things, doesn't it? Tim Westwood stuff and other things. The problem is no one accused by Reality Check team of being a Great Reset conspiracy theorist has ever alleged that the Great Reset plan was a secret or that the planners are a secret cabal. The fact that the well-known World Economic Forum, WEF, has broadcast its plans around the world obviously excludes the possibility that the plans were secret or even that they have acted secretively. I cover this in News Theory Part 1 as well, you know, about the Great Reset being a conspiracy theory, as Andrew Marr said. We go through it. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. I mean, these guys, this is what 5th generation warfare looks like. These guys are shooting you in the face with psyops. That's what they're doing. They got psyops and they're shooting you in the face with it. You got to remember that. The contradiction was a fabrication of the BBC Reality Check journalist's own making. It was seemingly inserted to support their accusation that those who criticized the WEF's Great Reset were alluding to the secret cabal. In reality, the critics were openly pointing their fingers directly at the WEF and his partners. No suggestions of secret cabal or secret plans were ever made. No. They're all out in the open. The BBC's evident intention was to impugn critics of the Great Reset by falsely claiming that their views were illogical, speculative assumptions, and were therefore conspiracy theories. The BBC propagandists created this myth themselves in order to deliberately mislead their readers. This is very definition of disinformation. This is the very definition of disinformation. It's true. The Reality Check team then reported that the Great Reset initiative was launched by King the Prince Charles as a plan to remodel the global economy. They talked about the West's undemocratic power to lobby for ideas which could potentially transform the global economy. They added that the WEF and its Davos delegates have huge influence on the world events. They even raised the point that there are legitimate concerns about the potential impact of digital technology vigorously pushed in the Great Reset on civil liberties and jobs. In short, the BBC Reality Check team gave a reasonable account of the arguments put forward by those who they dismissed out of hand by labeling them conspiracy theorists. The BBC journalist performed this trick by making up a reported opinion about the secret cabal and then falsely ascribing it to the Great Reset critics. In order to deter their reader from any further examination of the Great Reset, The BBC's alleged journalist claimed that the Great Reset itself was a light on specific detail. This was light on specific detail. This, again, was pure disinformation. The same journalist had to admit that the existence of the published book called COVID-19, The Great Reset, in it, co-authors Klaus Schwab and Thierry Malleret wrote, "Our objective was to write a relatively concise and simple book to help the reader understand what's coming in the multitude of domains. The reference information appears at the end of the book, and direct attributions have been minimized in the text." The references included links to the WEF documents, such as COVID-19 risk outlook, a preliminary mapping and its implications. This is just one document that forms part of the WEF's extensive alleged risk mapping program. The mapping program, in turn, informs the WEF's highly detailed strategic intelligence, which the WEF claim will enable it to make sense of the complex forces driving transformational changes across economies, industries, and global issues. There really isn't any facet of economy, industry, or indeed any global issue or aspect of our lives for which the WEF doesn't already have detailed, self-serving, transformational plan. The BBC's claim that the Great Reset lacks specific detail is absurd. The plan couldn't be more detailed or specific. Rachel Scherer's subsequent assertion that the Great Reset represents a vague set of proposals was complete nonsense based upon the BBC's own propaganda. The objective was to convince the BBC readers that the criticism of the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory. It is self-evident that both Scherer's and Reality Check's articles served as defense of the WEF's Great Reset. We have still other good reasons to question Scherer's judgment. Dr. Simon Godek, a scientist who turned to journalism and has questioned the safety and efficacy of the COVID jabs, thereby excluding him from Musinski and Levy's epistemic authorities, shared a black humored joke as a social media meme. It showed the aging physical decline of former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. Godek quipped, "Was it the shots, mRNA, or meth?" This joke was subsequently picked up by BBC verified propagandist Cheyenne Saradazide, who reshared it with the comment, 4 million views for this nonsense from a blue-tick conspiracy theorist. Godek's post was indeed nonsense because it was a joke. When Scherer posted Sadrizade's comment, she displayed a woeful lack of comprehension and notable lack of sense of humor. She added her own inane interpretation with this absurd headline. Breaking: conspiracy theory peddlers blame the passage of time on vaccines. This may seem like a trivial matter, but it's not. Like Mariana Spring, Rachel Scherer is another BBC specialist disinformation reporter. That Scherer apparently can't tell the difference between a joke and disinformation certainly brings her alleged specialism into concern. To fully appreciate how the conspiracy theory label is deployed by the legacy media, we can look at the recent video by journalist and broadcaster Andrew Neil, who is the former editor of the Sunday Times, an ex-BBC presenter and the current chairman of The Spectator. When he left the BBC, Neil was reported to have been at the heart of the BBC's political coverage for the best part of 3 decades. In a discussion with Sam Leaf, The Spectator's literary editor, about Russell Brand allegations, Neil lamented that social media had enabled too many people, most of whom he considered to be stupid, to express their opinions. Based on this comment, it is evident that if Neil is familiar with the work of Musinski and Levy, he would probably consider himself a journalist, member of the so-called epistemic authorities. Neil spoke about the 4-year investigation conducted by the legacy media that eventually produced the Brand allegations. He described it in glowing terms and noted that the independent media, which he called the alternative media, had neither the resources nor the expertise to do such an exhaustive investigation. The Spectator YouTube channel that Neil heads has 300,000 subscribers. By comparison, Russell Brand has 6.6 million YouTube subscribers. Consequently, this channel had considerably more resources than does The Spectator. However, following the alleged legacy media investigation of Brand, YouTube demonetized his account. So now Brand channel resources are flagging by comparison. Unlike the independent media, which is almost entirely funded by the reader and audience donations, the legacy media is funded by either corporate advertising or, in the case of the BBC, coercive license fees. UK print media has been declining for years as people increasingly consume news online. In addition, state broadcasters such as the BBC and Channel 4 are shedding UK viewers, UK viewers in their millions. They're also shredding them. Nonetheless, as Neil observed, legacy media budgets are enormous compared to the shoestring income cobbled together by the independent media. That stark contrast hasn't stopped the establishment, which relies on the legacy media for its propaganda and owns most of it, from panicking. Their panic explains the commissioning of the Cairncross review, intended to provide some sort of rationale for propping up the legacy media. Ironically, the Cairncross review concluded that legacy media needed new sources of funding, removed from direct government control. Of course, genuinely independent news media have already achieved new sources of funding by going directly to their audiences, some of whom value their independent viewpoint enough to support it financially. Dame Cairncross, DBE, FRSC, FACSS, Royal Society, I don't know, apparently considered the independent media funding model to be rubbish. She ruled it out because, as she put it, the stories people want to read may not always be the ones that they ought to read. Ha! I love it. She practically declared that what the public ought to read should be stipulated by the epistemic authorities. Instead, Cairncross determined that the creation of the new Institute for Public Interest News was needed to ensure this news overseeing body would be independent. Dame Cairncross recommended that it build strong partnerships with the BBC and be funded by the UK government. That's they're a bunch of cads, eh? Her suggestion meant that, just like the current independent media, the legacy media of the future would be funded by the public. The difference being that the two funding models was that Cairncross would not be voluntary but achieved through enforced taxation. Though the new body she envisioned, instead of the public choosing which media outlets they want to support, the epistemic authorities and the government would decide for them. How nice. What Francis Cairncross ultimately recommended was state regulation of the internet as a means of protecting the legacy media from public opinion. These regulations would tell the people which media outlets they should trust and hopefully prevent them from supporting the wrong media. Dame Cairncross review dovetailed perfectly with the progress of the UK Online Safety Act, OSA, through Parliament in her review. She wrote, "The government will want to consider these recommendations in the context of its parallel work on online harms, disinformation, and digital competition, to determine whether the recommendations set out here should be pursued separately or as part of a broader package of measures. In particular, it is for government to determine how best to design and execute policy relating to the activities of online platforms, including any regulatory oversight. The review is neutral." Neutral. That's what I said, and that's what he said. The OSA has passed all UK parliamentary reading stages and should receive royal assent any day now. Well, of course it will, from the guy in the Great Reset. Meow, 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 meow. He launched it. I mean, you can't make it up, can you? It's established Ofcom as the internet regulator. The purpose of the act is supposedly to improve public safety online, especially child safety, but it is patently obvious that the real objective of the OSA is to stop people from sharing information on social media that the government wishes to prevent from being shared. The article you are reading, for example. The USA will limit the online reach of the independent media. Accomplishing this aim is of vital importance to the establishment. All of the Meroso, all the more so, because public interest in the legacy media's online news reporting is also plummeting. Yes, it is. In addition, the OSA provides significant protection for each of the regulated media organizations that the state controls and categorizes as a recognized news publisher. This means every legacy outlet plus favored independent media outlets such as Bellingcat, which is also funded by the establishment. MI6, MI6, MI5, MI5. Intelligence, na, 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 na. So, given its protective care and vast resources, what alleged expertise did the legacy media bring to its investigations of Russell Brand? Do you suppose, for a full account of this claimed journalism, you can read this article? But perhaps I should warn you in advance that while the allegations against Brand are very serious and should be investigated by the police, the legacy media team disappointingly didn't present a shred of real evidence to support those reported allegations. Worse, the legacy media evidently fabricated purported evidence to mislead its readers and viewing audiences, thereby undermining the accounts of the potential victims. Yet, according to our Andrew Neil over at the Spectator, for the legacy media to have expended its considerable resources over a period of 4 years to produce this voluminous research, which we can call ham-fisted detritus, requires great expertise. In the Spectator review, Leaf asked Neil for his opinion about the possibility that legacy media had launched a coordinated attack on Brand. Here is how Neil replied. There is no virtue to it at all. And the people who are pushing this line, there's a kind of conspiracy to do him down, are the very people who believe in all sorts of conspiracies as well. That vaccinations put little microchips in our body, that the Bush administration was really behind 9/11, and all the other nonsense. Of course, naturally, we live in a world run by lizard people. We all know who they are, the lizard people. The mainstream media knows who they are. We're just too frightened to point out that the lizards among us. They're conspiracists on everything now. It is possible, though hard to substantiate, that a tiny minority of people labeled as conspiracy theorists believe that microchips are in COVID shots. While the advent of moats make this claim at least feasible, the vast majority of people who questioned the jabs and who were also labeled as conspiracy theorists by the epistemic authorities were more concerned about the experimental status, the potential unknown risk, and the questionable efficacy of the jabs, not to mention the absence of any completed trials. Neil's tiresome lizard refrain was based solely on the opinion of one prominent so-called conspiracy theorist, David Icke, whose extremely speculative hypothesis of the Sumerian Anunnaki was based upon his interpretation of a few Gnostic texts, the Nag Hammadi, the Dead Sea Scrolls, etc., and the work of scholars such as Zechariah Sitchin. No one who seriously questioned the COVID jabs, including tens of thousands of UK doctors and nurses, did so because they thought the royals were lizards. Not for that matter did the structural engineers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks question the official account of 9/11 because they imagined that former US President Bush is a shape-shifting pan-dimensional reptile. Let us step back and ask, if Andrew Neil is, as he claims, the intellectual superior of anyone who suggests there may have been a coordinated legacy media attack on Brand, then why does he overlook the clear as day fact that the allegations against Brand were reported simultaneously by almost the entire legacy media on both sides of the Atlantic? Doesn't such an absolute fact, such as is such irrefutable evidence, point to at least the possibility of planned coordination? And because that is the case, we are left with only one conclusion: Neil deliberately used and tried to a tried and true propaganda technique called the straw man argument. That is, he attributed preposterous beliefs to people he disagrees with in order to falsely debunk with contrived ease arguments they had never made. This technique is also called logical fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. Then he used a related technique termed composition fallacy to manipulatively claim that the opinion of one person whom he labels a conspiracy theorist, he is referring to Ike without naming him, represents the views of everyone he labels a conspiracy theorist. This is extremely common legacy media tactic. Did Neil say anything about the common suspicion of a possible coordinated attack on Brand? Yes, he did. Conspiracism is a defense that is quite hard to deal with because it is so ludicrous. It is a defense that that doesn't need facts. It is a culture in which Russell Brand lived and profited, or at least did until YouTube pulled the plug on his revenues. So that's what they deal in. They don't deal in the gathering of evidence. All these conspiracy theorists can have their absurd opinions about what's really going on here with Russell Brand, but as to establish what's going on, to produce the evidence takes investigative journalism. Oh, you arsehole. It is worth reiterating yet again that the investigation into the Brand allegation provided nothing but allegations. This does not mean that the allegations aren't true, but the legacy media journalists have not provided anything approaching the evidence that Neil claims exists. Notice that Neil used the word ludicrous to signal to his audience that the people he called conspiracy theorists hold ludicrous beliefs. But think about it. His claim was based on his own ludicrous assertions and logical fallacies, not on any actual evidence. So if we are to take Neil at his word and establish what's going on, then we need to look at the evidence in the hope of establishing some facts. Okay, let's do that. It is a fact that following publications of the allegations, the legacy media did not immediately set about finding further evidence to support the possible victims' claims. Instead, the legacy media turned its attention to attacking the conspiratorial views of Brand and his followers. Example 1. As soon as the allegations against Brand were published, the BBC wrote that he had developed a cult following and had dabbled in conspiracy theories. To those charges, the BBC added the scintillating fact that Brand had built a following during the alleged COVID-19 pandemic because he discussed conspiracy theories surrounding the disease. Example 2. 2 days later, using the same alleged cult theme, the Metro published the article titled "From COVID Denial to Mainstream Media Hatred Inside Russell Brand's Conspiracy-Fueled Cult Online Following." Example 3. A couple of days after that, on the other side of the planet, Australia's ABC News claimed that Brand's followers respond to his rants simply because he is controversial and that his audience is comprised of people chasing conspiracy theories. Example 4. Following the allegations against Brand, the UK government decided that it would express its opinions on the potential criminal investigations. No less than the Prime Minister's office issued an official statement declaring that these are very serious and concerning allegations. The examples are endless. We don't have to have space to cite them all. We do. How odd then for Andrew Neil to have claimed in his interview that no one could give a monkey's about Russell Brand. The evidence thoroughly contradicts Andrew Neil. It appears that the entire legacy media from all corners of the globe and the UK government are very interested in Russell Brand's allegations. The UK government publicised opinion was followed up by email letter from Dame Caroline Dinenage, DB MP, to numerous social media and online news sites, including the Chinese-owned TikTok and the video hosting service Rumble, requesting that Brand be demonetized on those online platforms. Caroline Dinenage, as I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, is Baroness Lancaster Kimbolton, a leading member of the establishment and a member of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Support Select Committee. There is no surprise that this very committee was instrumental in creating Online Safety Act. Moreover, when the Baroness was the Minister of State for Digital and Sport from February 2020 to September 2021, she had ministerial responsibility for guiding the passage of an online safety bill towards becoming the Online Safety Act. The common law concepts of innocent until proven guilty, which Neil conceded was an important principle of UK liberal democracy, seems to mean practically nothing to Dinenage. The notion is bandied about in some quarters of the legacy media that Dinenage was acting independently. That may be true, but why then did she use the Office of House Commons letterhead for her correspondence? As yet, there has been no official statement from the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee on the allegations against Brand. Reportedly, it has merely acknowledged that only some of the letters sent out under its name were approved. Considering that all the letters under its letterhead were shameful examples of rank authoritarianism, the fact that any of them were apparently approved indicates the dictatorial tendencies of the Select Committee as a whole. What actual facts have been established? First, it is a fact that the legacy media has exploited the allegations and has deployed the composition fallacy to discredit both brands and his social media's followers' opinions. Second, it is a fact that the allegations about Brand emerged at the same time that the Online Safety Bill passed its final reading stage. The Brand allegations grabbed all the headlines, leaving virtually no room for prominent coverage of the imminent UK censorship law by the legacy media, thoroughly distracting the UK public. True. Third, it is a fact that the purpose of the Online Safety Act is to shore up the dwindling reach of legacy media and censor its independent media competition. Fourth, it is a fact that Brand and his followers are considered part of the independent media, which legacy media accuses of being conspiracy theorists. Fifth, it is a fact that formative figures in the UK government have used the allegations published by the legacy media to attempt to limit the reach of someone who has millions of followers and whom they accuse of being a conspiracy theorist. Sixth, there's few of them. It is a fact that limiting the reach of popular conspiracy theorists is exactly what the Online Safety Act is designed to achieve. There is solid evidence supporting each of these facts. So what did Andrew Neil, a presumed member of the epistemic authorities, make of the facts and the supporting evidence that he insists and the entire legacy media he champions hold so dear? In his Spectator interview, Neil had this to say: I think Brand, because Russell Brand's position in terms of variety of conspiracies is very similar to their conspiracies. They regard him as he's one of us. So regardless of what he's accused of, we need to rally behind him. We need to get behind him. They're trying to pick us off. I mean, don't forget, they're conspiracy theorists. So therefore, they are paranoid. They're not just paranoid. They do know most sensible people are against them. And I think it's a kind of rallying defense to look after one of their own. The Spectator interviews were posted on September the 23rd after the Dinenage letters and the legacy media reports we've just discussed were published. In other words, Neil had mounds of material at his fingertips, but he chose to discard all the evidence and ignore the numerous facts pointing to a possible political motive for the global legacy media and the UK government's pursuit of brand. Instead, he simply cast all the evidence and facts aside and dove into his conspiracy theory accusation. This is a classic case of how the conspiracy theory label is applied by people such as Neil, who do not wish to acknowledge contradictory evidence or facts. The conspiracy theory charge enables Neil and his legacy media cohorts to create what they pretend are unquestionable narratives, which they expect their leaderships and viewerships to trust on the flimsy basis of their laughable, self-aggrandized claims to be epistemic authorities. It should be noted that this was precisely what the science of conspiracism decrees. When Sam Leaf, Neil's interviewer, pointed out that so-called conspiracy theorists cannot be categorized by any single political ideology, Neil didn't pause to consider the implications of his underlying accurate statement. Rather, he embarked on an anecdotal reminiscence, as if trying to justify his bizarre conspiracy theory view. Having dismissed all evidence to the contrary, he falsely asserted that conspiracy theory lies only on the extremes of politics, and that the far left and the far right conspiracy theorists all believe essentially the same thing. He opined that both alleged extremist wings, and therefore all of the conspiracy theorists he imagines, hate liberal democracy. His conclusions: people like Russell Brand are no friends of liberal democracy, and neither are his supporters. As we discussed in part 1, this is a mindless proselytizing, entrenched establishment elitists seriously expect us to accept that the people who most fiercely protect and seek to exercise our democratic rights to question power are all extremist conspiracy theorists. Neil apparently believes that liberal democracy is embodied by the public's trust in the establishment's epistemic authorities. Consequently, in his evident view, anyone who challenges the authorities and their pronouncements and edicts is undermining liberal democracy. But what he is describing is actually the polity of totalitarian fascist state, a complete inversion of liberal democracy and the principles it is supposedly based on. It is evident that from Neil's perspectives, only stupid people, conspiracy theorists, question epistemic truth. As presumably defined by his narrow authoritarian class, he views all such stupid people as unintelligent extremists who seek to destroy the social order he disingenuously called liberal democracy. Anyone who uses the conspiracy theory label does so not because they value the evidence, the facts, or the dialectic, but because they will not countenance any challenge to their worldview or any dissent from their claimed authority. The conspiracy theory charge is an authoritarian propaganda construct intentionally created to censor legitimate fact-based opinion. It is time we stand up to the epistemic authorities and reject their elitist authoritarian pretense of intellectual superiority. It is time to insist that all evidence is discussed, that all facts are established and reported to the public. It is time to reject the state propagandist conspiracy theory canard. There you go. I extend my gratitude to my editor, who has provided invaluable contributions to my articles since October 2021, who, for personal reasons, prefers to remain anonymous. Check out his Substack. There you go. Iain Davis, Delusional Blogger. There's his Substack down there. Everybody wants to get on it. Want to get on it. he's a brilliant guy. He's a very clever guy. I like him very much. He has good following as well, good followers. And that is a very good article, very in depth. As you see, he likes to write. So I don't know how many words that is. Probably about 4,000 or 5,000 plus. And it is full of knowledge, full of links as well. You can go through that article, and you can find all the links. One of my favorite links, of course, was that one to the amazing 5 authors who mentioned my I love it. Here we go. Is this it? Oh wow. Yeah, what is a great reset and how did it get hijacked? I love that this was written by 5 journalists. 5 people wrote this. They've taken that off now because it doesn't help them. But there you go. Down there is old Klaus Schwab from my Schwab Family Values article. I'm really happy. I'll probably do a read through of that soon as well. Alex Thompson did a read through of it at one point. That was really good. Really good. I really enjoyed it. Anyway, that was it. So that was Iain Davis, Delusional Blogger. He's a brilliant writer. You should support him, of course. Click his stuff, look around his site, get his books if you want to, and support real independent journalism. For me, Johnny Vedmore, this read through is over. Out.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed